Welcome to this lecture about Arabia before the time of Muhammad. My name is Andreas Maurer and I feel privileged to speak to you, and I trust that my words will encourage you and enhance your Christian life. I also hope that Muslims who listen to these words will be positively challenged to analyze their faith in a constructive, positive way and take steps towards accepting the facts and the truth. Our particular topic today is based on my book Ask Your Muslim Friend, and it is found under the main heading 1. Islamic Teaching and 1.1 The History of Islam on pages 13 to 20. The questions we are going to discuss now are: how was the time before Muhammad was born in Arabia? What people groups lived there, and what kind of life did they live? Which religious beliefs did the people have and practice? What can we learn from this period of history? How can these topics constructively be discussed between Christians and Muslims? Often Muslims call the time prior to Muhammad's birth, which was about 570 after Christ, the age of ignorance. In Arabic, al-Jahiliyyah. I have asked some Muslims what they understand about this term. The answers were different, and many Muslims know nothing about it. The main point which Muslims believe is that it was Muhammad who came at that time in history and who guided people and was teaching things which people were ignorant before. However, an interesting question you may discuss with Muslims is: are then all people lost and go to hell before the time of Muhammad, since they were ignorant and did not know the so-called Islamic righteous way, which allegedly only Muhammad proclaimed during his life? If this is the case, can it be true that only the people who lived with Muhammad and the people thereafter could profit from his teaching and were no longer ignorant? When we study the time immediately prior to when Muhammad lived, we may list the following main points concerning history and social life. First, two great world powers controlled the Orient and the 6th century AD. These are the Byzantine and the Sassanid empires. The Arabian Peninsula bordered on both of these two empires. Thirdly, trade flourished on the caravan routes along the Red Sea, linking East Africa with East Asia, with the so-called Silk Road and Europe. The city of Mecca had become an important center of trade, but was also a religious center and place of pilgrimage. One of the main sources of income of the people in Mecca was to manufacture idols and sell them. Different sources say there were about 360 idols at that time of history, and eventually Muhammad destroyed them. We are aware that Muhammad's father's name was Abdullah. It was common at that time that sons were named after the family idol's name. So it appears that the name Allah was known and that one of the 360 idols' name was Allah. Further, it appears that later Muhammad destroyed all idols but left this one and proclaimed that there is only one and his name is Allah. What do you think about this? Have you asked your Muslim friend what his view is on this issue? Another significant issue we may look at briefly is how women were treated at the time. It is commonly known that women in the 7th century had few, if any, rights. Women had little protection. Often small girls were buried alive for various reasons. The questions are now, did Muhammad bring about social justice in this respect? When we look at modern world, we realize there is little or even no progress. Of course, there are some Islamic countries where women have gained certain rights. However, if we, for instance, consider Afghanistan today, where the Taliban have gained power again, we learn about a very sad situation. Please note that the Taliban claim to be true followers of Muhammad and his teaching. As we hear in the news, women gradually are deprived from taking part in public life. Women have to wear the prescribed burqa, which is the total covering of the body, including head and face. They have lost their former jobs. And in addition, girls after the age of 12 are no longer allowed at school anymore. That means no secondary school education for girls. We may discuss this with Muslims. Why is Islam supporting social injustice with women today? In contrast, what was Jesus' view on women and how did he encounter in practical everyday life? What stories can we as Christians share from the Bible in this respect? There are many stories in the Bible which show the wonderful attitude Jesus had on women. Let me just give you some examples which illustrate how Jesus treated women. First, Jesus and the Samaritan woman. This we can read in John chapter 4, verses 5 to 43. Then also, for instance, the wedding at Cana, John chapter 2, verses 1 to 12. Or the woman subjected to bleeding. We can read this in Luke chapter 8, 43 to 48. Another aspect we may discuss briefly is about the Bedouin tribal life at the time of history. We can point out the following characteristics. The tribes were permanently in conflict with each other and often formed shifting alliances. Unity and lasting peace did simply not exist. The strongest ruled and feuds were common. Usually people settled at oases which became economic centers. And also we can point to a long, rich tradition of Arabic poetry which existed already at that time and before. When we look at all these points, dear friends, what would you say is the same and what is different to the life of Muslims today? What is the view of our Muslim friends on these issues? In summary, we may point out the following concerning the religion of the Arabs at that time of history. First, most Arabs were animists. Secondly, Mecca was the center for religious activity and the Kaaba was believed to host 360 idols. It was common, and this is the third point, to appease to subordinate gods who were believed to influence people's life. For instance, 3 goddesses were revered. These are mentioned in the Quran in Surah 53. Fourthly, a notion of a high god existed. Fifth point, people brought offerings to spirits believed living in caves, trees, etc. Sixth point, the black stone in Mecca was already at that time an object of veneration to be kissed. Considering these points, in which way would you say is the faith of Muslim different today? How would your Muslim friend explain these issues? The Kaaba is considered the central point on earth in the Islamic world. Thousands of Muslims undertake their pilgrimage each year to this place, and I've heard many stories surrounding this event. It came to my attention that one of the main questions by many Muslims is, what possibly may be inside this mysterious cube? Some Muslims answered that they have realized the following. First, they say there is nothing inside. It is just an empty room with utter darkness where only Allah lives in it. Secondly, there is only one bulb hanging on the ceiling and there is always light, although there is no electrical supply. Next point, there is only a chair inside the Kaaba where originally Muhammad sat on it. Or another saying is that there is a small table inside and the original Quran is on it. Listening to such stories, what is your view and what is your Muslim friends' view on this issue? It is well known that many Jews were living in the Arabian Peninsula. We can list the following about the Jews. First, they were industrious and talented in trade, agriculture and the manufacture of arms. They were also gifted in languages, and thus Arabs were dependent on them for translation. The Jews usually lived in separate districts and believed that they were the chosen people. Fourth point, Muhammad had many encounters with Jews and learned from them about the Torah and the Talmud. What else do we know from the encounters between Muhammad and the Jews? Is this possibly an explanation why there are so many references from the Old Testament in the Quran? What is your Muslim friend's point of view? Let me briefly answer the first two questions, what I just said. The encounter of Muhammad with the Jews was in Mecca first peaceful, but later in Medina, the Jews and the Arabs under the leading of Muhammad became enemies. Muhammad adopted many stories from the Bible, but most of them are now retold in a rather distorted way in the Quran. Muhammad, by the way, never ordered to write a new book, since he believed that the Jews and Christians already have the book from God. Muhammad also assumed that stories he heard from the Jews were all written in the Bible. But this is not true, since some of these stories were not from the Bible, but rather from Jewish tradition. Muhammad was not able to read the Bible in its original language, since it was written in Hebrew and Greek. Within the Arabian Peninsula, there were many small Christian establishments in various places. There were three major areas of Christianity on the fringes of Arabia. In addition, the following can be said. Numerous Arab tribes had accepted the Christian faith at that time. Muhammad had contact with Christians, and thus he heard stories from the New Testament. Sadly enough, the Christians were not united, but had rather arguments about some fundamental theological issues. It appears, therefore, that Christians did not obey the Great Commission as written in the Bible by sharing the gospel, and it is evident that Muhammad, as a result, never had the opportunity to learn about the biblical way of salvation. What is the reason why there are so few Christians in this area today? What can the church learn from these historical events today? In the book Ask Your Muslim Friend, the story of the Year of the Elephant is told on pages 18 to 20. This event takes place in the same year when Muhammad was born. It is an interesting story, and often I've asked Muslims about it. However, only few of them had a knowledge about it. Nevertheless, Muslim scholars give great tribute to this event and draw important conclusions out of it for the benefit of Muhammad and Islam. Please study the 5 points listed on page 20 and possibly discuss them with your Muslim friend. This is it for today. Write in the comments section where you want me to elaborate further. You can also write your questions in the comments and I will respond to each of you. Please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out any of the future lectures. And please download our literature from our website. See you soon again. Good day and God bless you.